Welcome, Chris De La Cruz. Thank you so much for being here and for taking the time to have this conversation today.
Thank you for having me, Tony Ann. Lovely, lovely invitation. I'm excited to share this dialogue with you.
Absolutely, thank you so much. I'm so grateful for this opportunity because I've had the opportunity to connect with Chris through a community, the Lily community to be specific, and we have this connection from that same connection, our Lily family. And, it's a great honor to have this conversation because I know that there's so much you have to share about your story and your journey from where you've come into this world and to where you are today. And I'd love to share this story with others so they can learn from you and what you garnered through your wisdom and your experience.
I'm excited to
So
share.
thank you,
Thank
thank
you.
you. Now, Chris is, of course, amazing. She is a minister, universal minister, a mystic teacher, intuitive, who's gone through the depths of training through your own journey and experience, and has a great background in working with the inner child, dealing with any wounding, sexual violence, and reparenting the inner child. And so I feel that's important to highlight because the conversation will be about highlighting some of the things that the inner child experiences and the trauma that we go through, in our childhood. And this is important because the purpose, one of the purposes of this conversation is to highlight and bring to awareness things that people may not be aware of with the inner child and how we can change the paradigm with the inner child parenting. So thank you.
Great.
Awesome. So, Chris, tell me about, you've come so far. What is it that you feel has brought you to this space that you're in now, in terms of your development? What can you guide us through that journey of where you started? What prompted you to do this work within yourself? And can you share with us where you started?
Yeah, thanks for asking. And I love that we've connected at this time in your life because what brought me here, um, first and foremost, there was a life of denial and what I call the lies I tell myself for most of my life until I had children.
Mm,
And they were such a magic conduit for me to face myself. I am a firm believer that everything that happens outside of me that doesn't feel peaceful, harmonious, and healthy is a call for me to come back inside of myself. And those revelations are relatively new because it really took being an abusive parent, admitting I was an abusive parent. I was emotionally abusive and on occasion violent as well. And I knew that my children deserved better, but I didn't know how to stop. And when we would go out in public, we were the perfect family. And everybody thought I was a great mother. And it was at home in our privacy that I knew who I was. And it brought me to the realization of my suicidal ideations that I'd lived with for my entire life and not wanting to hurt my children anymore, knew that they deserved more, but also didn't want them raised by my former spouse. And there was no other choice. There was no other choice than to start healing. And at the time, and even now, it's the hardest decision I ever had to make. But it was my very first act of power, my very first decision to start giving something to me. And granted, at the time, I did not love myself at all. I hated myself all day, every day. But starting therapy and giving myself that gift once a week that initially I thought I was giving my children saved my life and was the
Mm,
beginning.
mm. Wow. Thank you so much for being so real. Oh my gosh. I love your honesty and realness. So you mentioned some key things I wanted to touch on. You mentioned how being a mother, you realized how abusive you were, and this is exactly what I'd love to touch base on. And I appreciate your honesty um, because this is often something that's hidden in the unconscious. It's so unconscious. A lot of us are not aware of how abuse shows up. Right? It's seen as normal. So you mentioned abusive, emotionally abusive, sometimes violent. Can you share how any examples of what that looked like for you? Like what were you experiencing inside, and how did that look on the outside? Was it verbally that for people who are not aware what emotional abuse is, like what was that for you at the time?
Yeah, and I love what you said about the fact that we've normalized abuse on the planet. Um, I I know things now that I didn't know then, but I realize that we've minimalized and normalized abuse as a whole, as a society.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
there were people in my life that watched the way I treated my children. There are people in my inner circle, family members, and none of them thought it was a problem. And so that was all part of what clicked together for me, that there was a bigger picture here than me and my children. And as I began to study trauma and abuse and what that looks like and why we don't know, because I think that's the biggest thing. I believe that human beings parent and love in the best and only way they know how. Nobody
Right.
has children to abuse them. I mean, we can say most humans don't do that.
Right.
And we just don't know. So
Right.
as I began to study this for myself so that I could become the loving mother that my children deserve, I started to realize how far back this goes and how deeply we have just created acceptance around it. There are so many things that happen to almost every human on this planet, and we just accept them. At the point when our children start their terrible twos, they're starting to individuate. They're starting to try to figure out who they are as a little human being. And then we, as parents, in parenting books and all types of parental training, are taught that our children need to behave, how to
Mm.
control them. And
Mm-hmm.
so, very often, a small child in that age who's starting to, what they're doing is they are looking for a role model of healthy feelings. And
Mm-hmm.
so they start to have feelings. And those feelings include anger, shame, fear, and sadness. And they're
Mm-hmm.
looking for an adult say, "Gosh, sweetheart, you're doing a great job of being angry. Thank you so much for letting me be present while you learn how to express yourself." But
Mm-hmm.
instead, we say when a child is sad and they cry and they're in the terrible twos, stop that. Stop that right now. Stop crying, or I'm going to give you a reason to cry.
Mm-hmm.
In that moment, instead of being taught my feelings are important and I have this safe
Mm-hmm.
human in my life who's going to teach me how to feel in a healthy way, I'm taught to stop feeling and to be ashamed of my feelings and to push them down. And most
Mm-hmm.
people are never taught how to come out of that, how to recover from that. And most humans
Mm,
don't know how to feel healthy feelings. We mistake drama for healthy feelings, and we don't usually have a role model of how that's supposed to go.
mm-hmm. So it sounds like you're saying there was a lot of like shutting down of your child's emotions and not being present to that, giving that, making it wrong, shaming it, whatever that case is, and that is emotional abuse.
Yeah, I be completely shut down myself, could not have feelings around me. And this is
Mm,
most of the planet. You know, we think it's really sweet when you start to cry and someone hands you a tissue. Really, what they're
mm.
saying is, please stop feeling in front of me. I can't have feelings right now. And if you keep having these feelings, I'm going to have them too. So here's a tissue and stop crying.
Uncomfortable.
Yes. We don't know how. It doesn't feel good. And so I needed my children to be quiet, well behaved, perfect, don't inconvenience me, don't cause me a problem, and just don't have a voice.
Wow. Wow, you summed up a big piece of why so many people grow up feeling so shut down. And I mean, I completely can understand it. It starts with the parents and goes right down. It's like passed down, right?
Yeah, and as we reflect, as I can reflect on this now, and I'm really, really blessed. You know, I started this path when my children were probably 7 and they're 16 now. So,
That's
yeah, so
great.
we've had more time to recover than we've had wounding.
That's amazing.
It's I'm so blessed, and I remember the day we were on our way out for a regular Sunday afternoon, playtime. They were about 10. And my daughter started telling me a story. My son was with me and we were getting in the car. And she said, Mom, we're really happy that crazy mommy doesn't live with us anymore. That's what we called her. Once I was able to accept that that I was volatile and I was violent and I was terrifying. Once I was able to accept that we had to come up with a name for her so we could talk about her, so we could talk about me and
Mm,
who I used to be. My daughter said, Mommy, I'm really, really happy that crazy mommy doesn't live with us anymore. Said
mm,
when crazy mommy would get upset, and I would at the towards the end, I would know to send my children upstairs so they wouldn't be hurt by me. So I
mm,
would send them upstairs, and my daughter said we would sit at the top of the stairs, holding each other and crying and praying for a different family, a family that loved us.
mm.
And while it was the hardest thing I have ever had to hear from either of my children, I knew that that didn't normally get spoken out loud until someone was in their 40s, had blown up their life, was having a midlife crisis, and was in therapy. And they would say it to a stranger, not to the person who wounded them. So I knew I was building
Mhm.
trust and we were starting to heal together.
Right. I think that's quite moving what you said, how they were able to be so vulnerable with you and share how what they were feeling in the moment. I mean, it takes great courage to do that, as a child.
Parenting is the most unbelievable spiritual gift anyone can ever receive if they are willing to look at their children's behavior as a reflection of their own vibration and their own level of healing instead of looking at this person as being so often, especially as a parent of a teenager, people will tell me they have bad kids. I don't
Hmm.
believe in bad kids. I believe in kids that are in pain, begging for love and connection, and parents who insist on living as the victim. not only to their children, but to the world.
Hmm. Wow. So you went through this whole transformation. So you became aware. So it sounds like you went through a process. You first had to become aware of who you were being as a mother and as a parent. First, you realized, hey, this isn't working. This isn't who I want to be. And then you shifted into getting support and assistance through therapy.
My family, the people who surrounded me, because most of the planet is abusive, didn't see a problem with
Mm,
it. And if it was not for divine intervention, I would not be here, and my son probably wouldn't be alive. I went to be violent on this one particular day. I was about to grab him by the neck, and Spirit said, "If you touch him right now, there will be no turning back." And I knew I would
wow.
go to prison. I knew I would kill him and go to prison. And that was a
Wow.
Saturday. And on Tuesday, I was in my first therapy session.
Oh wow, Chris. I'm getting goosebumps. Oof. Glory be to God. I'm so grateful that you listened, right? So creators communicated with you at that particular point, intercepted.
Absolutely. Opening to that is the greatest gift I've ever been given. Hard one.
Oof.
I call them the gifts of darkness. And if we have the courage to open them, to really just take off that bow and dive into what's being given to us, no matter how dark it seems at the time, we can be transformed.
Ooh. Gifts of darkness. I love how you put that into frame. Gifts of
Mm.
darkness. I want to dive into that in a minute. I just really want to just say just commend you for your courage and sharing your story just now and being so real again and vulnerable. Um, it truly is amazing to see how powerful it is when we connect to spirit and get that guidance because of how important it is a child in your care, right? The beloved. And you were just probably not even realizing you were being abusive. You just had probably generational patterns passed on to you. You think you're doing what seems to be okay, which is corporal punishment, whatever that flavor looks like, right? It's different in many households. What?
I
Go
called
ahead.
it a healthy dose of respect at the time,
Mm,
but the bottom line is my children were terrified of me. And to be able to own that is very, very hard because the planet tells you your children are supposed to respect you. But really, your children are supposed to feel safe and connected in your presence.
mm.
And not just to you, but more importantly, safe and connected to themselves.
Right.
And most don't.
So it's a fair based type of parenting, which is if you don't spare me or if you don't do as I say, then this is the consequence you get.
And even
Yeah.
now, as a parent to teens, recognizing that their behavior, all of if it is not healthy for them and healthy for those around them, if they're hurting themselves and others, which teens do, it's part of the individuation process. It's just part of trying to figure out who I am as a human. Um, but to hold loving space for the ups and the downs, the things that go really well and the things where they're just going to flat out hurt themselves and others in a request to have their wounds acknowledged because we're all wounded.
Mm-hmm.
And if we don't take care of it in our younger years, it carries us to more wounding, usually.
Beautiful. As you said, it's such a growth process. So they've experienced their own wounding, and now they're working through that now in their teens. But at least you guys have that opportunity. 7 years old and up. That's such a blessing, like you said, because now they've been able to come into a whole different space compared to it being in their adulthood where they're dealing with all that trauma from then,
Yeah, and
right?
you said something magical a few minutes ago. We can't heal what we don't acknowledge. It's not possible. And so while I'm not here to change my children, I am here to make my children aware of why they do what they do. My daughter was about 9 and she came home from a weekend at her dad's and she said, Mom, Daddy is so sad. And I said, Yes, he is, baby. And she said, Mommy, I tried everything I could to make him not sad and nothing worked. And I saw my little codependent rescuer in the making right there.
Mhm.
And I said, Sweetheart, I said, it's Daddy's job to make himself not sad. It's Daddy's job to find another adult to talk to about his sadness. It's not your job to fix and heal Daddy. And it's been a path. Watching my children in our home and in our space and in our relationship having more knowledge about wounding and trauma bonding and how to heal than most adults, and then co-parenting and then sending them out into the world where this knowledge essentially does them no good.
I mean, that's amazing that you've been able to pass that on, right? That knowledge and that healing together. Isn't that amazing? I feel that's a win. That's
It's a
amazing.
gift, but I have also been shown by spirit recently in the last probably 2 years. My children, they struggle. They're 16. It just is. And it was probably about 2 years ago, and I was just like, Spirit, what am I missing? Like, kids they hate their parents at a certain age, and it's just like it is what it is. So I was like praying and meditating, and I'm like, please help me understand what it is that I'm missing about this process, so that I can show up as a better parent. Because I had a particular incident with my daughter. We were having I'm real, I'm honest. We were having an argument and I didn't want to continue arguing with my child. So I went in my room and I shut the door. I'm like, we'll reconvene later. And I shut my door and Spirit said, how much longer are you going to let your inner 13-year-old parent your outer 13-year-old?
Ooh.
I was like, ooh, ouch. So real. And so I didn't want my inner child to parent my child anymore. I want to show up in my adult. It took a good couple weeks of praying and meditating and saying, what am I missing? What am I missing? Why am I showing up like this? And I knew it was because I was taking things personally that weren't personal. But I wanted to know why she was behaving the way she was behaving. And my son is homeschooled. My daughter is in mainstream school because socialization is very important to her. My son gets that in sports. My daughter doesn't. So Spirit told me that in order for my daughter to bond with her peers, she has to have trauma in her life. And I am that parent that she gets to go to school every day and go, my mom, blah, 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 so she can bond with other 15-year-old girls. She wouldn't be able to bond with her peers without that. And I just need to be that person. I can parent as lovingly as possible, and my child still needs to bond on trauma with her peers. She knows. Most kids have no clue, but she still needs to do it, and I'm going to let her do it. I'm not going to take it personally.
Wow. So it sounds like for you, you have a relationship with the Creator, Spirit. And that seems to be such an important connection that's supporting you along the parenting journey, in guiding you in making better choices or just doing the inner work as a parent, reparenting yourself so that you can be a better parent for your team.
And my relationship with Spirit is the core and the foundation for everything in my life. That is my best friend. That is my confidant. That is my guide. And that is my everything. And if I want to tap in and I get an answer in 10 minutes, I'm golden. But if it takes me 6 weeks, I'm going to sit there until I receive, until I am open to the truth of what I'm missing in my human eyes.
Right. That's awesome. I appreciate you sharing that because it's such and I'm bringing it up because it's such an it's so essential part of the parenting process because It's as if we don't, if we rely upon just our own knowing, then we may be doing things we're not aware of, and we're not including the higher parent, the parents of all parents.
Well, and yeah, and for me, some of the answers, a number of the answers, not some, quite a few of the answers that I have received from the divine about how to be a better parent are really uncomfortable, and I don't like them. I'm going to be honest. I'll look at them and I'll go,
Mm.
I don't like that answer, you know? And sometimes I'll be really stubborn and I'll be like, can you reframe it in another way for me? You know? But, you know, part of letting children individuate is to step back from so much of the planetary conditioning about who and what a parent is supposed to be. And I remember in this, to this day, I think this is probably the best piece of advice Spirit has ever given me about parenting. Spirit told me, because I was a helicopter parent and it was not good. You know, really trying to control so much to the point where if I thought they were even going to do something, I wanted to be on that. Like, don't even think about it, you know? I was a little
Mhm.
gentler at that point, but I still saw myself doing it, especially as they become teens, because we're very fearful of what our teens will do as we give them more freedom. So,
Right.
starting to give them more freedom, and Spirit said, my daughter's name is Ava. Ava's soul has a better plan for her than you do, and God has a better plan for her than Ava's soul. And I was
Mhm.
able to really let go and just step back and let her come to me and let her create painful situations or challenges for herself and know that she is divinely guided and protected and she knows where to find me when she's ready.
Mhm. Wow. So you're what you're saying is it's although we're parents and we're being that channel to support them and be their facilitator, their guidance, whatever they need on earth, the real parent behind the scenes.
Yeah, and that if we choose, I can look at, I'm the big person with the knowledge and you're the little person who knows nothing, or I can see us from a soul's perspective and know that we're equal and that she has written her story and I have written mine and then we wrote this piece together.
Mm-hmm. So there's this
Yeah.
equality and also this place where the higher self of that soul or that being is included and it's also being part of the journey. It's not just the ego or personality.
Yes. And it felt so much better for me, more relaxed and more loving to parent from there.
Hmm. Wow. So there's so much we've talked about, from your journey of being a parent, from your journey before you started your therapy, to your own self awareness, your own self healing, which has led you to a place of creating a more wholesome family where things are real, it's raw, it's truth. It's like working together as a family with whatever shows up, and you including spirit along with the journey so far.
Yes.
Now, I wanted to go into a little bit more about highlighting some more of the abuse that children face and that you faced in your childhood that impacted your psychological development and your own parenting journey. You mentioned emotional abuse. Did you feel that the did you were you exposed to violence as a child? Do you feel that's what made it so innate in you to pass on, or what is it that if you want to share, what is it? What type of abuse did you face? Was it emotional, physical? And I wanted to bring these up so we can highlight what the different ways abuse can show up.
Yeah, so I was a victim of a child pornography sex trafficking ring when I was very little. And
Mm,
it was, needless to say, out of kind of even what the mainstream abuse would be. Um, and and then in my home, it was more um, subtle, I guess. But what I have learned in my journey and my journey in supporting others is that those things that happen to us are traumatic, but trauma is how those things are addressed by your circle of trust and your circle of safety when you go to them to be saved or to, be helped. And so the biggest piece of the puzzle for me was I had no circle of trust and no circle of safety. And so it created dissociative amnesia just to be able to continue to function after what I saw and what I endured. And so I lived with the first 12 years of my life being a complete and total black hole as an adult. I didn't have my first memories until I was about 12. And not knowing why I created the adult life that I created. I ended up in a 14-year long emotionally abusive marriage, and I was baffled. My parents were married for over 50 years, and everybody who met my parents thought they had the perfect marriage. We would go to weddings and bridal showers, and everybody would ask my parents to speak. The bride and groom would take my parents aside and ask for advice. And, I now know that you never ever know what a person is enduring, even if you live in their home, because they still go behind closed doors. And then we have so normalized and minimalized exactly what we've been sharing that my very first therapy session, he asked, tell me about your family life growing up. And I looked at him and I said, I don't know what's wrong with me. There's something terribly wrong with me because I was raised by the Cleavers, which was a 1950s TV show about this perfect little family. I said, I was raised by the Cleavers. I had the best upbringing ever, but clearly there's something wrong with me. And
Mm-hmm.
and then he asked me to reveal to him my first memories, my earliest memories. And I looked at him and I said, I have no memories before the age of 12 at all, none.
Mm-hmm.
And I had told therapists that before. And, it's really important to find a match, the right match in a therapist, because I had told 5 therapists that before I found the right
Mm-hmm.
one. And he listened to me and he looked me in my eyes, and I could see him trying to decide if I was ready. And he said, You do know you were sexually abused, right?
I didn't know that.
I know, I can almost look at someone now and know, but as soon as they start speaking to me, I absolutely know. And so when he said that, I stared back into his eyes to see if he was my person. If he would be the person for the first time in my life, I would say yes to, because my heart knew. And I said yes. And 12 hours later, I had my first memories. I was 42 years old.
Wow.
We can't heal what we don't acknowledge.
Ooh.
And I had to be ready.
Oh my God. That was wow. Ooh.
It's a lot to breathe into.
Yeah.
The desire for
Mm-hmm.
my children. And he asked me also, and I love this too, because I always ask this when I have an intake session with a client, why are you here? What's the end game? What are you working towards? And I told him, I said, I have 2 things. There are 2 reasons I'm here. I said, I want to know why I stayed for 14 years, and I want to enjoy my children. Because I knew I didn't enjoy them. And I knew that we all deserved it.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Lord, I think that the courage to face your stuff, the first is being aware of what happened, being willing to face it takes so much courage, and it's admirable what that you've done, and for all the parents who do that work, it's really sacred and work to do. Um, but whatever you went through, I'm so sorry that you went through that. You know, we don't need to go into the details here. But what I would like to know is, and this could be another conversation, because I think there is, these different levels of abuse. Because you brought up something so key, which is some people blatantly have the experience of abuse. Some people grow up in that fairy tale home and they cannot tell that they're going through that type of, whether it be physical, emotional, mental, psychological, whatever the abuse looks like. Um, and to people, it looks normal. You grow up thinking, no, I had a great childhood. Why am I what's wrong with me? And you were able to go through those layers, and thankfully, you were able to find where the wound was, right? Or where the abuse occurred. Were you did you have corporal punishment in your childhood?
Um,
As like being.
it was more, there was on occasion. Um, but it was more the subtleties, and there are so many subtleties, and so many people endure unkind joking from the people who are supposed to love and care for them in their lives, and then they're told, and this is, it's gaslighting. You're too serious. You don't know how to take a joke. Why are you acting like that? It's just kidding. And so there was a lot of that, and there was just a lot of just really codependent, abusive patterns that we again have normalized and accepted.
Mhm.
And then from a very, very small age, because without safety we'll die. If we are not safe in our environment, we will create a fantasy version of safety. And that fantasy bond carries us through our childhood and then tends to be at the core of most adult relationships. We create a fantasy bond with our partner, and we often will partner with people who we think we can fix from the perspective of the codependent victim triangle. If I love you and I help you heal and I fix you, you'll come back and fix me, right? We'll make a deal. And then when that deal doesn't go as you planned, then it becomes the wonderful drug of drama. And we all love that. If I can be enmeshed with a partner who's in pain while I'm in pain, we can have so much drama that I will never, ever be able to face the real reasons why I am who I am.
Wow. So the mirror of the relationship, looking at that as an opportunity for healing and transforming from the codependent to what would be the other side of that, the empowered
Empowered
couple
sovereignty.
or
Yeah. Yeah.
awesome.
I believe that, and this is, for me, all this learning came down to energy. I have learned to, I hesitate to say simplify because I don't want to insult anyone's journey. This is not simple. But what was revealed to me by spirit is that energy is supposed to move. We can go all the way back to Newton's law of motion. Energy at rest stays at rest. Energy in motion stays in motion unless either is acted upon by an outside force. Moving energy is love and health. Stuck energy is disease, fear, codependency, not health. And so I learned, spirit taught me very early on in my journey that my only job was to go inside of myself, find the stuck energy, and inspire it to move. And
Mm.
so as I would partner with people, we would bring all our stuff out here. And this is the plight of the empath, the wounded empath. We bring all our stuff out here and we get all muddled up together, and I can't tell what's mine and what's yours. And we've accepted this
Mm-hmm.
as the empath experience. So much so that people will have physical responses inside their body to someone else's energy. And you're just an
Mm.
empath. That's what happens to an empath. But what I've been shown is that a healed, sovereign, empowered empath shares energy with God and the earth, and that is their source. And that keeps the energy moving and healthy. And it then creates this love that they can share, but their energy is not shared.
Hmm. So there's that boundary that you're talking
Human
about.
boundaries, and then bigger than that, because we know what human boundaries look like. There are books about that.
Right.
But we don't know about energetic boundaries. There are not workshops and books and YouTube videos on that until now.
Right. Oh boy, that's a whole thing.
And this is what we're being invited to do, to recognize, to, I believe, to remember who we are. I call it my God self. And when I remember who I am, and when I inspire all that energy that's not love to move and be loved, then I can emanate and share that with others. Otherwise, we're all
Yeah.
muddied up together.
Ooh. And there it goes, and that's where abuse can occur too, because there's no clear boundaries between who you are, who I am, and it becomes one big pool of mud,
Yeah,
one big pool of mud.
yeah. And it should be clear. You know, I remember when I was married, and I don't know why I would ask myself this, but I would say, "Who am I?" And I had no idea. No idea. And you asked me earlier today to send you like a little brief bio, and all I wanted to say is, and I knew this wasn't the right human answer, but it's like, I am a clear, unobstructed conduit of source energy. I know that's not what you were looking for, but that's who I am.
Yeah.
You know, at my core, I know that that is how I live and how I respond to challenges. And I think that's the biggest thing. Whether it's a parenting challenge, whether it's a partnership challenge or a work challenge, whatever comes at me that doesn't feel healthy, harmonious, and peaceful for me is an immense gift. Oh, you've shown me a piece of me I haven't met yet. Show me a piece of me calling for my love and attention. I didn't know it was there. Ah, what an amazing gift. Let me sit with this in solitude. Let me greet it. Let me meet it. Let me make love to it. And then I will come back to you.
Hmm. So you're doing that inner work. So for as a parent and the being, your own connection to doing your inner work is what's supporting you. It's keeping you in a state where you can face all these challenges as a parent, or just being a human being, reparenting your own inner world so that you can be a better version of yourself. So you mentioned you're in your own family life, your own family world, dealing with your own wounds, entering into other relationships, and how you brought in your own inner codependency and working through that so that you can be more sovereign. We've talked about the different forms of abuse that you've gone through. You mentioned emotional, the shaming, right? Gaslighting. Those are all broad terms that I would love to dive into a little bit more in terms of how abuse shows up in the subtleties, because I think that's where you can see abuse. It's clear. You hit, if you're if somebody's beating a child, or if someone is doing something that's harmful. If it's physically seen, yeah. But the subtleties is where it tends to want to hide. And I'd love to highlight your observation in your life of how abuse has shown up in the subtleties, so that we can shed light on abuse in those um, subtleties in those areas, because I think that that's where people may not be aware.
Yeah, and I love that. Thanks, Tony. And that's probably the biggest thing that I hear from clients is the voice in our heads.
Is
The
the what? Repeat
voice
that.
in our heads. Most
Okay.
people's self talk is brutal,
Mm,
and they're so mean to themselves.
mm,
And it is a learned behavior. And we are simply repeating and believing what we've been taught about ourselves.
Right.
And it's huge. And no matter where you are in your healing, in life, in your humanity, you're going to make mistakes. And I don't believe in mistakes. I believe everything's perfect. But you're going to do things that hurt yourself and hurt others. It's part of what we've agreed to do here in this lovely human dance. But how do you respond to you when you do something to yourself or to someone else that doesn't feel respectful, kind, and loving?
Mm.
And for me, all of this has been a process. And I've only recently gotten to the place where the voice in my head is so loving, so compassionate, understanding, and so kind that I've invited people from my past who I've wounded to come back and allow me to hold space and listen to how I've wounded them. I have gotten to the place recently where I let myself accept that I have wounded people. And the most compassionate thing for me is to love me through all of that and to create the space for anyone who needs to be heard by me in terms of whatever their perception is. You know, the bottom line is my eyes look at Chris's world. Tony Ann's looks at Tony Ann's world. And as much as we want to say being human is an objective experience, there is nothing objective about being human. My entire experience is mine. Your entire experience is yours. So somebody can come to me and tell me how I've wounded them, and I can love myself enough to accept that I did things that weren't loving, kind, and gentle, and I can let them have the experience of having been hurt by me. And I can hold loving and compassionate space for that. And that's been a real beautiful relationship changer for me. But that negative self-talk is probably the most debilitating and common result of abuse that this planet carries.
So the self-talk, so that's the effect of abuse that happens from parents. So based on how they communicate, so based on the communication, based on the interactions, based on the relationships from throughout their whole life, that becomes their psychology that they experience, that critical, that hateful self. So how does for as a parent, when you're going through the subtleties, you mentioned a few things. So even in your experience, you mentioned being made fun of, and it was gaslighting. So it may seem so like natural to them, or parents or family members. Oh, I'm just making a joke. It could be whatever it is that they were making a joke about. But it was abusive, and it wasn't labeled as abuse at that time. And that you carried into your adulthood. Can you give me an example of that? I just want to see if we can highlight an example of what that looks like. Could it be, someone made fun of your clothes, or what did they make fun of?
Well, I even experienced it as an adult when I became a Universalist minister. I don't share the same spiritual, religious beliefs with my family of origin. And I don't share them with most of the planet because they're deeply personal and they were created by me. For me, by me with spirit. And let me tell you, I mean, what I endured from my family of origin when I decided to become a Universalist minister, it was unkind. And I needed to be okay with that, because I recognize that there are only two foundational motivators for behavior on this planet. There's either love or there's fear. And I also needed to accept, for me, when I would come up against behaviors that were unkind towards me and that they were fear-based, that's okay. But me not having boundaries was also my fear-based response. And
Mm,
so not
mm,
being liked and not being accepted and not taking any of it personally, being able to individuate myself, empower myself, and move into that sovereignty required me to have really nice boundaries, really solid but kind and loving boundaries. To recognize the difference between loving boundaries and fearful walls, and then to be able to react and respond from that place for my own unconditional love of self, and to never mistake unconditional love and abuse to confuse them ever again.
mm. Okay, this is important. You brought up something. Okay, so this is key because the misconception is that the love because that's what's missing. Actually, what you're saying is like we think abuse is love and it's not. It's completely not. So you're saying unconditional love. Can you tell me, give me an example of what that looks like in parenting? Unconditional love. Let's say a child makes a mistake. This is common, right? A child makes a mistake. The parent walks in. What would abuse look like, and what would unconditional love parenting look like? So you could see the people can see the difference.
Yeah.
You know?
So I waited a really long time to get my children phones. Yeah.
Okay.
And so the way I explained it to my children was that we are given tools throughout our lives, and we can use those tools for love, or we can use those tools for fear. We can use those things for love, or we can use them to hurt ourselves and others. And so I shared with them, your body is your first and most important tool. And when I witness that you are able to use your body and all that you do as a tool of love and not as a tool of fear, hurting yourself and others, then we'll talk about having a phone. And so I got them, like, you read books about this part. I got them a little contract, they had to initial all the rules and then sign and accept that they were going to follow the rules of the phone. And if they didn't follow the rules of the phone, they wouldn't have a phone. And I would say it took my son about 6 weeks to break some of the phone rules. And I went to him and I said, sweetheart, this is hurting you and others. This is a tool for you to use in a loving way. If you cannot use it in a loving way, then we'll have to double back. We'll go back to using the body, the vessel, as a loving tool, and then we'll work towards the phone again. But right now, this tool is not a tool that you have the foundation to work with. And I also think part of it, and again, I'm learning because they were younger. It was probably 4 years ago when they got their phones, and now they're 16. And you kind of put them out there in the world, and then the opportunity, and this is how I explain it to my children. There are mistakes that are mistakes, and then there are mistakes with no long-term effects, and then there are mistakes with long-term effects. And making mistakes that have no long-term effects, I feel like it's a part of learning. And then maybe written into my children's soul contracts are mistakes with long-term effects. But I want them to have the awareness that they've written this story with spirit, and that they can change the story if they wish. And here's what that would look like. And then making sure that I have good boundaries with whatever comes up. And then I also believe that for me, teaching my children about cause and effect, actions and consequences at a very young age, and letting them know that this is in their control and that I am just the person standing back giving the consequences of the behavior.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead. Yeah. So it sounds like you had this you had a really heart to heart talk with your children, and that sounds very comforting, very warm. It feels like you're able to create that container that allows them to, love is just being there, being present to having those conversations. As someone who makes a mistake, an abusive parent would come in and have a whole different type of conversation from what I hear you say. That's like a completely different type of parenting approach. One may have a different way of abusively communicating, could be
Yes.
shaming, making them wrong, whatever the case, but instead you made it, you lightened it up, you had a conversation about it. Is that what it sounds like?
And making sure the communication is loving and making sure that I
Right,
am the safe container, and then making
right.
sure that my children understand that in those moments their wounds are guiding them,
Hmm.
and then they get to
Hmm.
decide if their wounds will continue to guide them. And they're 16, so sometimes those wounds kind of win, and I have to be okay with that.
There ones that they choose that they choose
Yes.
their wounds.
Yes, I mean, they're bonding with their peers who are wounded as well. They want
Hmm.
to connect, and the bottom line, Marianne, and this is for me been the biggest challenge of remembering my God self and coming home to me. What has been revealed to me by Spirit is that we're all here, we're all playing the game. We signed up. We're like, oh, I want to go to Earth, I want to be human. I love that video game. It's my favorite. And we go and we play, right? And then many of us have this common story, this common theme. And trauma is scary. It's scary to address for a lot of people. But what's far scarier than that is moving into your power and your sovereignty
Hmm.
and remembering who you are. And on a sick planet, when you are sovereign and you remember your power and who you are, you might as well have cancer. When you're the healthy one on a sick planet, it feels very lonely. And it perpetuates that abandonment wound if we haven't already addressed it. And most people would rather be sick and connected than healthy and sovereign.
Mm.
It's a
Oh.
lot. And if we don't create the really solid relationship with spirit, which is our original abandonment wound that all of us carry and we're trying to come home to, this journey will only go so far.
Right. Wow, that's a deep conversation
Whole
there,
nother
talking
one.
about your journey back home and dealing with all that, the wounds of just getting back, owning your power, stepping into who you are, going from that trauma wounded victim child to growing up to sovereign adult, emotionally stable parent of yourself. And if you have an external child, yes, you have a child. But so this conversation applies not just to parents or people who have children, but the reparenting inside. And so, from what you've said so far, your journey, you've come from this place of woundedness, and where you're sitting right now is this place where there's more unconditional love parenting happening inside of you, which creates a much more safer container. And so that is, I feel, the journey that most people, if they're willing to take, can take and get to that place where they're at peace, they're loving themselves again. Um, what really irks me is how can you not have to even go through that? Is it possible to live in a world, and maybe it sounds like maybe that's cliche, I don't know, because every soul has different agreements based upon what they've come to learn. But will we always have a mental health crisis based upon people's mental health because of wounds? Or is it possible to live in a world where people are raised in a safe, loving container where their inner Christ can shine and they can be and blossom who they are here to be? Or do people have to go through that road of the woundedness to get to that space of sovereignty? That's a question I have to sit because, do people have to go through abuse? Is it possible? Because abuse is not the way of the creator. That's not the creator's way of parenting. how do we create a world where um, love is the parenting model versus the which abuse, which is in my eyes is very harmful to the soul.
Yeah, and I love that. I love that thought. And you know, we are all on our different individual journeys and our different relationships with spirit and our different pieces of guidance in terms of why. And I know now that the reason I survived what I survived is because I always knew what I now know, but it was the process of remembering. And so my whole life, some way, somehow, I knew I lived in a perfect planet. And the number one biggest thing that I have had to come to terms with is if I live on a perfect planet and I am guided by a perfect, loving God, then why is there abuse on this planet? And you know, I've traveled through many possibilities, even including, oh, the system broke, it wasn't intended this way, and all that, and that may be true because bottom line is, Tony, and all I know is I do not know. I don't really know anything. I know nothing. I know Chris's version and what has been revealed to me, and the only reason that I believe that is because it brings me comfort and safety and health, and it allows me to sleep at night and it allows
Mm-hmm.
me to live in harmony and peace. It is simply my version. But what has been revealed to me is, and I think many of us can agree on the fact that where we came from was perfect. And what I've been shown is I came here to experience the light and the dark, and that childhood sexual abuse is the most righteous judgment on this planet.
It's the most righteous judgment.
Yes, on this planet.
What is that?
If you take a child abuser and you put them in prison, all other prisoners will righteously judge the child abuser, and very often that child abuser will be murdered in prison. We judge that so harshly on this planet. And what has been revealed to me is that number one is a learned behavior that we are perpetuating in our pain and suffering on this planet. And that if I come to it from a place of compassion, and for me, I believe in reincarnation, and I believe I've lived many, many, many past lives, and I have memories of many past lives where I was a terrible, terrible human being. You know, there's an
Mm.
interesting movie out there that recently won a ton of awards called Everything Everywhere All at Once. And I am a
Mm.
firm believer that I am everywhere, everything, all at once, including the child abusers, including the rapists and the murderers. And so for me, this journey home to perfection and to love and to kindness and to compassion started with the forgiveness of self, of who I have been many,
Mm.
many other lives, and to witness for me, again, my process, the karmic balancing of the memories I have of the really, really wounded people I've been who acted out on others, in the knowing that this lifetime for me was a balancing of karmic scales. And when I
Mm.
can look at myself with the deepest, deepest of compassion and self love and lack of judgment and acceptance, then I can look at those that to others would have been grave wounding, and I can accept that they themselves were wounded and that I was their abuser at some point as well.
Mm.
For me, it was an act of clearing judgment, take on this
Mm,
soul's mission. I wanted to transcend judgment as a human.
mm. So it's really, really amazing that you're synthesizing your whole life experience, not just this one, but the
Yep.
ones before. So you're bringing it all into context with all of that which you were and all that you are now. It's like a whole journey of transformation from that abuse itself, whether it be from past lifetimes, coming into your own world of experiencing abuse again because it was already in your karma to work through. Here it is, you've made that decision as a soul to come in and work through that karma. So, this is a complex subject because this whole understanding of abuse and the opportunity presented by that soul. Some souls are born into a family of abuse. It's very clear. They're gonna be born. They're born to. There's a soul contract. The family is abusive. The parents are abusive. There's abusive patterns in the family line. They come into that family line and they experience abuse, right? Um, but then there's that opportunity to transform that within themselves so that they can transform that karma. Um, wow. Where am I going with this? I just feel that I guess it's helping me to understand why some people are born into a family of abuse and um, and how important it is to recognize abuse and to see it playing out and how it impacts one's psychological development and emotional well-being and how that impacts you later on in life. But through your journey, you've taken that whole process of working within yourself to get to this point of healing. And you've done, I want to just touch on the healing process. For some people who, there's a lot that we've talked about that I would love to dive deeper into, but I wanted to even just touch a little bit upon the healing process because for people who are wanting to reparent themselves, and you said something important, forgiveness, that I'd like to really highlight that if you've gone through abuse or experienced trauma or you haven't been your best self, you know, I get just holding that space for yourself to love and forgive and to know that there is redemption through love and through the creator. And that at this point in time it's never ever too late to start that
Ever.
process. You mentioned 40
Yeah.
years.
That's huge. I love that. And I didn't even start this journey till I was 42. And I still wanted to die every day until I was 46. And I just love that you said that. And so from this perspective, I used to I'm a member of the Speakers Bureau for RAIN, the Rape, Abuse, Incest National Network, and it's our nation's largest anti-sexual violence organization. And when I first was inaugurated, I spoke to academic audiences all the time. And so the number one biggest thing I can share with people, no matter who it is, no matter where they are, and this is the biggest thing, is you cannot heal in the same environment where you got sick. You cannot
Mhm.
heal in the same environment where you got sick. So if you are still in the environment where you got sick, reach out and get help right away. Right away.
So let's talk about that quickly because you mentioned you cannot heal in the environment you got sick. What that comes up for you is like, okay, if you got raped or abused, it could be by a partner or a family member. If you're still in the same company as that person, is that what you're saying, or what do you
It
mean by
could be
that? Is that
in
what
your
you?
family of origin, or it could be you recreating the abusive circumstances from your family of origin in your relationship now. It could be even with roommates now. It could be in friendships now. If you are being abused in any way, shape, or form, top priority is to get out of the abuse.
Okay, awesome. You stop it because it's just that perpetuation is just leads to
You're
further
living in
harm.
survival
And you
mode, trying not to die every day. Healing is not an option.
got it. Okay. to getting out of the situation piece, um, or getting out of it. So stopping, getting out of it. Now there are different forms of abuse. There's self abuse. I mean, this is a whole different day of conversation, but there's self abuse, and then there's of course abuse that you experience from others.
And there
Um,
is an amazing resource, and I give this to everybody, crisistext.org. And so anybody
mm,
can text to the number 741 741. Once again, just send a text to 741 741, and it can say anything, anything. I need help, I am suicidal, I just got raped, whatever it is, and that organization will pinpoint your location. They will put you on the top of the list to have the call received based on certain keywords that you might put, so you won't wait in a long queue if you're about to kill yourself. And they will figure out your location and give you resources for exactly what you asked for that are near you. Even if you are trapped in your home, hiding in the closet, and you're in the middle of the country somewhere and there aren't other humans for 60 miles, they will find you help. So that is
wow.
741 741. It is a text. You don't even have to speak, so no one will hear you cry for help.
Ooh, I got great news. Thank you for sharing that resource. Crisis
Yeah.
text line 741.
You
Is
do it
that right?
twice, 741 741. It's a 6-digit code, and then you text whatever your issue is, and they will help you.
That's amazing. Ooh, thank you so much for sharing that resource. That's good. It sounds like so there is help. So it sounds like for the healing work, you mentioned the first step is getting out of the abusive situation environment. The second step, I know you work with people who are going through that reparenting process with the inner child. Can you tell us a little bit about the work that you do, or how do you support people who are going through that reparenting process?
Yeah, thanks. So, getting out of the environment where you're being abused is the first step. And then going back to the brilliance that you said when we very first started talking, I can't heal what I don't acknowledge. And I had an intake call with a potential client some years ago, and she shared with me that one of her sons tried to commit suicide when he was like 13, and her other son
Mm,
started using heroin when he was 14. And in our
oh,
intake call, I explained to people what we're going to do, and I let her know that we would begin to address her wounding that caused her to be an abusive parent. And she wasn't ready. She wasn't ready. She said she wasn't an abusive parent. And that is impossible. It's impossible. And so I always tell people I live in a logical planet. 2 plus 2 must equal 4. If 2 plus 2 doesn't equal 4, we need to look for the lies we tell ourselves. And so for me, there is a place to look to even determine, do I need healing? How am I doing? And I call it
mm,
the inner report card on the outer report card on inner healing. And so we look at
mm,
our parenting. We look at our financial situation. We look at our physical health and our mental health. We look at our friendships,
mm,
our familial relationships, our romantic relationships, our career or our job, and our opportunities to use our gifts to be of service. And all those should be, you know, a C plus or better if we go through the report card. And we have to be really honest with ourselves. You can't heal unless you're ready to be brutally honest with yourself. And a lot of people think they are, but they want the magic pill. Give me the magic pill. Show me the way around it instead of through it. But what is happening in a life that doesn't feel good is a call for love. They call for connection. It's a call for compassion. And we can't do those things if something is hidden in the blind spot, alone and lonely, like the child that most of us were.
So yeah, this whole work requires that willingness to go within and to look at where we are and just being willing to face that, being honest, and that takes a lot of courage to go there. It's so it may seem scary, and but with the right person, the right support, the right container of love to hold that space for that person whose soul is ready to face that and go through that journey of transformation with the beloved, with the creator. If they choose to, it can be done with that love and grace without, and not so, I don't know if it's the word hellish or whatever it is, but whatever it doesn't have to be a journey where we do it alone. Um, we can call upon the higher power, that love, that forgiveness, that container to support us in being compassionate and caring as we do that healing process. I'm just looking at my little one who's moving around.
So many people are so humanly wounded by other humans, and their trust issues are so deep that they can't even perpetuate or create a relationship with spirit.
Oof, OMG.
They can't even trust God.
Oh my God. This is a huge one because I've gone through this and I'm working through that pain. Relationship thing with the beloved is trusting the creator completely. All hands, all heart, all body, whole life in type of thing. It's not like half in it, like totally, completely. And that is it gets through the inner work. If there's trust issues, which I've had, and maybe a lot of, like you said, a lot of people have that, doing that inner work with the beloved, the creator first, will open the gates for his love and more for him to be able to come into free will choice.
And I often will remind clients, we all have free will, and you will not get help and support from anyone, human or otherwise, unless you ask for it. Right. And so they'll come to me with these like immense problems, and my first thing is always to ask for help. They're like, ask who? I'm like, who do you think? Ask spirit for help, and then let it go. Let it go. It will be handled. But you have to, in your free will, say, I'd like my partner to join me in this, and most people can't.
Ooh, I want to talk about that within another conversation because I really believe that would be a really powerful transformation conversation because this is talked about now relationship with spirit and how that's integral in our own reparenting process. Because without the spirit, what are you working with? There's no healing, in my viewpoint. There's no way to heal and come into your you if spirit's not involved. I think that's a big component I'd love to talk about and how you cultivated your own relationship with the creator, how you've been able to build that trust relationship. I mean, if you were to rate your trust level, 1 to 5, everyone has a different range of where that trust is, but where they are internally in terms of their feelings. But if you are at a high level of trusting, I want to talk about that and how you went from where you were, if you've done that inner work, to how you accomplished that level 5.
Yeah, and I think that past trust is surrender. None of us want to hear that, Tanya, do we? That's one more thing I'm like, I don't like that answer.
I know what you said. Oh my, oh God, here we go. Let's talk about surrender. That's a whole conversation we gotta have. Surrender. What does that look like? What is that? Let's dive into it. What does that look like for someone? Resisting surrender is what's coming up. Resisting to surrender. Where does that come from? What's underneath that? And what does surrender look like?
So juicy. Yeah, I can. My biggest surrender. Gosh, the biggest
Oh,
challenge um, was in 2018. The last time I had a relationship with a narcissist, and I was with a
with who?
narcissist,
Oh,
and I was so angry when it was over. I was so, I was so, um, I was so superior, and I was so angry that I had done this much work, and you gave me this BS again. Like, really? But I kept praying and meditating because I knew there were answers, and they were in me, and I couldn't see them. And it took me about 6 weeks to unwrap that gift. And I was really sick of my own stuff, you know? And I say this to people, you know, what brings us to healing? Being fed up with our own BS. And so I was really fed up with myself and what I was still calling in, because I believe that I am responsible for the life I create. I call it radical responsibility. This is all me. I created it. And so I was praying and meditating. Is about 6 weeks in, and I did this massive clearing meditation before bed because I was done. 6 weeks, long enough. I've had it. And I fell asleep, and I woke up in the middle of the night, and my kids and I were in a little townhome, and so their little rooms were on either side of mine, and all our doors were open because we're little, and I need to hear them, you know, in the night. And I started screaming at God, and I just let loose. And I was like, how dare you do this to
mm,
me and make me go through this again? And then I started raging. And I flipped over and I started beating on my pillow. And I was going insane and just letting go, letting go. And I knew enough at that point that when the emotions come, let them, honor them. Don't stifle them. Don't push them down. As long as I'm not hurting myself or others, it's a healthy release. So I moved with it and with it. And I
mm,
kept asking Spirit, you know, what am I missing? What didn't I see? Where is the vibrational match? Because I know I attract what I am, not what I want.
mm. Oof, I can't.
So
Okay.
I kept
Oh.
trying to find the match. I attracted him for a reason.
Mm,
So I'm
mm,
raging and raging and raging, and I'm like, where didn't I see? Where is the match? What did I didn't notice? Show me the match. And now I'm on full fire, punching my pillow and screaming. And I hear a whisper, and it says, "There's your vibrational match."
there's your
The
vibrational match.
rage I was
What?
carrying and using to hurt me by partnering with a narcissist matches their rage that they use to hurt others.
I see.
And then I said to Spirit, I don't want or need this lesson anymore. Show me how to clear the vibrational match. Show me, I'll do
Mm,
it. Tell me what to pray for. I don't know what to pray for. What haven't I
mm.
prayed for? And Spirit said, you haven't prayed to be nothing. I've never hated an answer more in my life. Never, Christiane, in my
Nothing.
life have I hated an answer so much. I would say it took me another 2 weeks to bring in the courage to start praying to be nothing.
My God, I'm getting moved by that. Mm.
My entire life, including being by the bedside of both my dying parents. I've never said such a
Mm.
challenging prayer in my life. And that prayer is what comes back to me at times, even to this day, when I am doubting, when I am fearful, when I am not firmly seated in my power, and when I'm angry at God. I say, you made me pray to be nothing, and it's the worst prayer I've ever said in my entire life. And look what happens. And more often than not, it is the greatest blessing I've ever been given from Spirit.
Oh boy. So we morphed into a whole. So this is really cool because I love it. It's all
All of
connected,
it.
right? It's all connected because it's like here we are talking about becoming. This is what it's all about: becoming who you truly are, and coming through your own journey of abuse, self-healing, reparenting, loving yourself again. To again, and throughout the whole conversation, the undertone that I've heard you repeat over and over, and I'm highlighting this is your relationship with spirit and including spirit along the journey of healing as a really important aspect to your transcendence. So here you are, going all the way through the journey, and now you're like, boom, boom, nothingness. Now you've gone to sovereignty, which is what the creator is guiding you to your ultimate highest and best, holding that loving container, loving you in your anger, loving you in your rage, being that lover, that parent, that all in all, that can hold a container of you in your full essence, and you being able to release that in his presence, and knowing that you can fall upon that comfort and that love, even in that the deepest depth of that darkness, that you're not alone. And here you are again asking, what is my next step? And here the beloved takes you to nothingness, a whole different world of experience, which allows you to come to a deeper place of healing within you so you can be a better parent to yourself and for your
Well,
children.
and so spirit can parent through me. I'm not the
Right.
parent. I'm the
Exactly.
conduit of spirit.
Right. It's so key.
And
Yes.
then for me, I get to walk in ease and grace because it's simple.
That's a
It's
surrender, yeah.
simple when I am nothing and spirit is everything through me.
Mm,
Then
right.
even the most
Yeah.
challenging parenting situations, and I got to tell you, Tony, and I am in it right now. Like I am in it. I
You're in.
relocated my family from our forever home to the middle of nowhere, and it's been really challenging to do this. But I'm watching how I walk this experience. Everything from, and this is going to sound silly, but I mean, moving, especially moving 10 hours away, is one of the top 5 stressors on the planet. Ease and grace. I mean, I couldn't believe how gentle the process was. And, I got here and I was still holding on tight to my lifelong dreams. I had a beautiful spiritual center in Florida, and I had clients coming to sit in retreats with me from all over the world. I love my work. And I was so grateful to be able to give back in this magical way. And then it started to gently fall away, and I was shown it was time to move on. I didn't like that answer. And then I was shown I'm going to move to this little tiny house back in a suburban neighborhood, live in a mainstream. I didn't like any of these answers, none of them. But I moved in grace and I followed. I'm not leading, I am following.
Ooh, oh, stop right. Just, just stop there. And just, just like the Maya spirit, beloved is moving. Okay, he's calling. I'm gonna pause. I'm gonna stop right there.
Yeah,
Okay.
perfect. I'm going to go fill up my water and go potty.
Okay, great. Okay, I'll stop
Okay.
right here.
Are we taking 5?
Okay, yeah, let's do that. I'll text you.
Okay.
Let me see if I can